Hey everyone, and welcome to State of Fear, where we peel back the skin of the horror genre and see what's lurking underneath. I'm your host, the Fear Fan, and as a lifelong fan of the horror genre, I've seen a lot of trends come and go. From meta-humor to found footage, and from torture porn to the modern haunting film, horror goes through distinct cycles, usually starting with an innovative instant classic and continuing as others jump on the bandwagon, trying to turn the last big thing into the next big thing. And each cycle says something about the fears of the society that created it. A wave of meta-horror in the 90s as America laughed at the things that used to scare it, found footage in a post-9/11 world where people captured tragedy with camera phones on a daily basis, torture porn as we began to see the monster inside of each of us and fear what it was capable of, and a wave of remakes as we started to suspect what Michael Bay wanted to do to our childhood. And while that last may be a joke, it does indicate that people have a desire to return to the past, to a time when horror classics seemed to pop up with glorious regularity. And lately, I'm noticing that that desire seems to be taking an interesting turn. I don't know about anyone else, but it seems to me that lately, it's impossible not to notice a wave of films that are either set in the past or, more interestingly, in a present that seems oddly low-tech, as though they're simultaneously taking place in the 70s, 80s, and right now. While this may seem odd at first, after a little thought, one obvious reason does spring to mind: nostalgia. If the wave of remakes, sequels, and so forth we've spent the last decade alternately anticipating and loathing really does represent a desire to return to the heyday of horror, then setting new films in that time period and borrowing its aesthetic is just the natural next step. And if that's the case, it's a move I wholeheartedly support. While simply rehashing the stories of yesteryear may be a way of emulating what we used to have, what really made the stories great was the innovation, the willingness to try new things and present people with ideas they hadn't seen before. If borrowing the vibe of 30 or 40 years ago is the price, then maybe it's not such a high one, especially if, like me, you happen to think it looks fucking awesome. While that is a somewhat encouraging thought, another less heartening one was hot on its heels. Have we, as a society, reached the point where we have to retreat to the past to be frightened of certain things? Think about it for a second. We live in a world where everyone walks around with a camera in their pocket 24/7, and where, in spite of this, there still isn't any convincing proof of UFOs or ghosts. It's a world where every corner of the map has been filled in, and where science renders the strange and unknown more and more explicable every day. The light in every closet has been turned on to show that the boogeyman is a pile of coats and Dracula has feet of clay. In such a world, what is there left to be afraid of? For some, the answer is ourselves. We fear the ignorance, prejudice, and hate we see flowing from our own neighbors every day, and are terrified that these same black roots of casual cruelty and vitriolic bile run through us all, that they may even be the underlying truth of our species, and that any attempt at truth or beauty is just self-deception. Others, through retro horror, may just be seeking to dust off our old fears and presenting them to us in the only place they can still have the power to frighten the jaded modern world: the past. So, what do I think? Is it true that we live in a world that can no longer be frightened of the devils, ghosts, and demons that it no longer believes in? Well, yes, but also no. Personally, I think that while it gets a little harder to fear the actual existence of evil personified with each passing day, they can still have life in the modern world if we look to what those legends say about us. While demons, devils, and monsters red in tooth and claw may be able to give us the occasional jolt of instinctual fear, real terror has always come from a deeper place, the realm of metaphor, where, in looking at the monsters, we see a little too much of ourselves. George Romero's Legion of Glassy-Eyed Dead would not be so enduring if they didn't remind us so much of the complacent multitudes that unquestioningly follow the herd. Clive Barker and Bret Easton Ellis both took a look at the 80s culture of excess, and each took away a different, terrifying message. Barker, wondering at the depths the jaded could sink to in pursuit of new sensations, and Ellis, fascinated by the dehumanizing effect of a culture where everything is for sale. In short, while we, as a culture, may not fear the darkness outside the window quite as much as we used to, we are still terrified about what lies within us and always will be. Looking to our past can make it a little easier to put us in a superstitious mindset, but the real challenge for horror storytellers is to find a way to speak to us about our dark sides. Retro horror may be a fad, but like any fad, it says a lot about us, and while it may be alright to seek comfort in the past, we should be careful to use that setting and aesthetic to discuss the things that trouble us today. Fortunately, that seems to be a case with a lot of the more memorable films I've seen lately, whether it's the fear that our sexual exploits will literally come back to haunt us, or the concern that our minds may turn against us. Anyway, those are my thoughts on retro horror, why it's used, what it says about us, and how it can be made to work despite the fact that it's a trend. Think I'm right? Think I'm full of shit? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, this is the Fear Fan, signing out.
Come here, pretty please. Can you tell me where I am? Won't you say something? I need to get my bearings. I'm lost, and the shadows keep on chasing.